Jahmyr?
Can we kick it?
Jahmyr Gibbs.
Why are you laughing?
Alabama
Gibbs.
running back.
Jahmyr?
Jahmyr.
Yeah.
What did I say? I don't know. Jahmyr Gibbs.
This show's going great.
5'9", 199 pounds, 9.25 inch hands, 20 years old.
You're still doing that.
Still there.
Why not? We're going to keep it consistent. 4.36 in the 40. He had a 1.52 in the 10-yard split. So those are really exceptional numbers. The vertical, a little underwhelming, 33.5, just kind of average. Last year in 12 games, he had 151 attempts, 926 yards rushing, 7 touchdowns, 44 reception for 444 yards, and 3 additional touchdowns through the air.
Yeah, his 4.36 was the second fastest at the combine on the 40-yard dash. This is somebody who transferred from Georgia Tech to Alabama for the 2022 season. Really excelled in the passing game. Almost 1,000 yards for Alabama. Not bad for a guy of his size. Really fast. Excels in space. Really good in the passing game with really good hands. This is somebody who averaged 3.3 receptions per game over his entire college career. So he actually ran some pretty good routes as well. Good lateral cuts, quick feet. Just an explosive running back, number 2 running back in this class because he offers so much in the passing game, right? Yep. Like you hope he can turn into LaShawn McCoy. That's what you're hoping for. Alvin Kamara. That's what you're hoping with Jahmyr Gibbs. Real interested to see his draft capital. I think there's something that can happen here in the NFL draft. I could see something where Jahmyr Gibbs is possibly not the second running back taken in the NFL draft, and that could kind of shake things up. I can see a situation where like Zach Charbonnet is the second running back drafted in this class. Well, it kind of shocks us a little bit.
It depends on what they're looking for, whatever team is drafting, because he is a guy he's going to fit a role, and it's going to be a pass catching heavy role. He can do the stuff between the tackles, but
absolutely.
But if a team's not really looking for that guy that's going to be catching a bunch of passes, it might be a wasted pick to go out and get a Jahmyr Gibbs. You might be looking for somebody more physical, like a Charbonnet. So,
I thought he'd been like a really good pair up with like Raheem Mostert in Miami. Him and Jahmyr Gibbs, like that'd be a really good fit.
That'd be very fast.
That'd be very fast.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see him go to like Tennessee as like with Derrick Henry as a possible like future back there as well. It wouldn't scare me there. So, because obviously, with his cons power, doesn't really have a lot of power there due to his size and opportunity to be what hurts him is he doesn't have a large opportunity to be a 3-down running back, because of his size. He had the lowest amount of carries between the tackles in this entire class. He was given a ball less than 9% of the time on his short yardage runs. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't even asked to do that in Alabama. And there's a reason, because that's not where he's going to excel. When he was actually hit at the line or behind the line of scrimmage, he only averaged 0.9 yards per carry. So as you hear the name Jahmyr Gibbs, as he's like he's been a clear cut number 2 running back here, there is some concerns about what he has going on. Like I would trust Devon Achane a little bit more than Jahmyr Gibbs between the tackle. Like I think Achane has a higher % chance to be a 3-down back over Jahmyr Gibbs, who's only literally a half inch taller than him. So that's why I was confused about the size, because like everybody's talking about Jahmyr Gibbs and everybody loves him. He's clear cut number 2 everywhere. But then you look at Achane, it's like, well, Achane could probably do a little bit more. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs is way better in the passing game, way better catching the football, way crisper routes. He really does excel there, and he's a very exciting prospect for what he brings to the fantasy football landscape. But when you watch him, for me, again, not you, for me watching Jahmyr Gibbs, I like him a lot from a fantasy football prospect, but he's not like, wow, clear cut number 2. This is a guy I gotta have. Like there's a path there for me where situation and draft capital could get me excited about a Zach Charbonnet, a Devon Achane. But Gibbs definitely has a very high ceiling when it comes to fantasy football production. Currently my number 2 running back in his class. So again, not saying anything, but there's a path there where he could get slightly bumped for me personally.
Yeah, I'm with you. I do have him currently as my number 2 back in the class, but the guy that I have right behind him, which is a guy that we actually haven't talked about yet and won't talk about till our next running back episode.
Who's that?
Tajay Spears. I actually,
wow.
I have
watched him. I'm excited about him.
Yeah,
he's a good player. I have Charbonnet just a tiny bit below. Another guy we're going to talk about in a little bit, Roshan Johnson, just a little bit below. So I like Gibbs.
So we're on the same page, huh?
I'm with you on this. Like
first I'm hearing about this.
I think that he deserves to be the number 2 running back in the class. But if somebody had anyone else there, I probably wouldn't argue it super strongly. I gave him a good score. He has a 75.15 for me. So he has a good score. All time for the all-time ranks, he would be 7th right now, all time. So the guys that are ahead of him would be Bijan Robinson, Dobbins, Swift, Taylor, Javonte, and Brees. And those aren't in the exact order, but
so he's good.
He's a very good prospect. He reminds me a lot of Jamal Charles. I hear the Alvin Kamara comp a lot. I don't like the Alvin Kamara comp. I get it, but we're talking about one player that wins significantly more with speed than the other one does. And so I don't love that comp. I think Jamal Charles is closer for me. But we look at Jamal Charles, one of the best assets of his game was his receiving ability. And
all-time great fantasy football running back. All-time great.
Absolutely. So I think if he gets with the right offense, the right offensive mind that's going to utilize his skill set, I don't want to see him shoved down the gut 15 times a game. A few times a game, sure. Keep things
him
even.
honest. Yep.
But I want to see him on the outsides. I want to see him in the receiving game. That's how I want to see him used. I think he actually did have very good patience as a runner. I think he waited for the hole to develop well. So I did appreciate that. But when we're talking about like breaking tackles and contact balance, very mediocre when it comes to that kind of stuff, which normally I don't like running backs like that. Normally I need to see very high marks in those types of areas. So that is pretty low, but we're talking about somebody with great burst, great speed, and great quickness. So when you have those three things, you can win differently than other players do. It's not just straight line speed. He can make guys miss as well. So I think that's how he's going to win at the next level. And, yes, people are upset that he didn't cross the 200-pound threshold, but he literally missed it by a pound. He's 199 pounds. So, let's not judge him.
At 5'9", that's
right.
You know what I mean? That's a pretty
Stout.
good size,
Exactly.
stout running back. I saw a lot of the same things you guys did. I do think he's a guy that has a tendency to try to break things to the outside. I think that's his, that's kind of where he prefers to run and operate, which makes sense. I mean, he doesn't have a big power element or anything like that to his game. So to me, from a fantasy standpoint, I see him in a similar light to a guy coming out like ETN. You know what I mean?
Sure.
From the fact that you're going to want to use him on the perimeter, but what he does that ETN didn't do is he's very natural catching the ball. He excels in that. ETN I think has come a long way from where he was in college to where he is now in the pros. But there was a point in college when he was like, when the ball is thrown to me, I clam up and basically get afraid of the ball. You know what I mean? Like that's not at all in Gibbs' makeup at all. So, I mean, he's the exact opposite. So I do think he can be a difference maker in the NFL from a fantasy perspective, as long as he gets into a system that's going to highlight him. But in my opinion, you don't draft a guy like this without having a plan to use him that way, because that's so clearly how he excels.
We literally saw it just happen to a prospect that we absolutely loved, DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
So it is possible.
It is possible.
He goes to Detroit, like in a dome. That's gonna be a good spot, and just the coaching the scheme didn't work out for him so far to date.
Right.
And then they just go in and sign David Montgomery tonight. So it's kind of like that's an example of somebody where it didn't work out or the right system. It might not be as pretty as it may seem.
Right. No, I guess it does happen. So I guess keep an eye out for the landing spot, because it could be one of these frustrating things if he lands in the wrong situation. Like you were saying, running up the gut and stuff like that, and not using him in the passing game. He's never going to look good doing that.
Right.
So
we saw that with Edwards-Helaire. We saw that in the beginning of his career with Josh Jacobs. We saw like guys that are good receiving backs just not get used as receivers.
Right.
For whatever.
And then it's weird because then, they used Jerick McKinnon that way.
Right.
Which is weird because then you think, Gibbs on the Chiefs would be nice. Jahmyr Gibbs on the Commanders would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
So it is. It's interesting. Ron Rivera, a ton of time with Christian McCaffrey.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Commanders would be a pretty good slot for him with an opportunity to be the guy there as well. But very interesting prospect. The speed, like Garrett said, that speed is always going to win. The NFL is always going to be enticed by that speed.
And for me personally, from a fantasy perspective, that's what's keeping him above a guy like Zach Charbonnet.
Mm-hmm.
He just doesn't have that same sort of burst. That he doesn't have the high upside that I see in a guy like Gibbs.
Do you guys think he ends up going in the first round?
No.
On the mock draft database, like it takes all the NFL mock drafts and kind of makes an ADP on him. He's hovering right around 32, 34, which is like fringe.
Right at the
I
beginning
think he
of the
falls
second.
in like that Jonathan Taylor, Dennis Swift, were like high in the second round, right around there. I do not think he goes in the first round. I don't think he deserves to go in the first round. He's not a first round running back because he's not a 3-down running back.
He's not everything, right?
Yeah, I think the only running backs that go in the first round are 3-down running backs.
I could see a scenario where he does just because of his speed and his explosiveness and his pass catching ability, kind of like we saw with ETN. But I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, top of the second.
It wouldn't shock me to see a team, because we're starting to see a little bit more of this, and I think GMs like to do this. They do it often with quarterback, but specifically with running back as well. A team trade into, this year would be the 31st spot to take him because you get that fifth-year option. So I think that can be enticing because then you can basically say, okay, we'll get the 5th-year option, and then we'll franchise him 1 year. We get 6 years of fairly inexpensive running back play, and then we can just move on from him.
See, this is where, like, again, if I was running an NFL franchise, I would look at it different. I'm like, wow, why would I draft Jahmyr Gibbs when I could just draft Devin Achane? And
there are guys that do that, for sure.
And here's the difference from an NFL GM standpoint. Like, Devin Achane excels in kick returns. Like so if you get if you get kick return yards in your league, if that's one of your bonuses, Achane goes up your board a lot because he's a very good kick returner. I think his first game versus Alabama, the very first kickoff, he busted for a huge, massive run, and you saw speed right away. So I think from an NFL standpoint, like you get a little bit more from that standpoint as well from a guy like Achane. So interesting. I'm excited to see where he ends up because, like Matt said, that's a very that could be the difference between him being my number 2 overall prospect, or I'm just gonna take Jackson Smith and Jigba number 2.
Sure.
Or I'll just wait, or I'll trade down and take Achane or Zach Charbonnet or Tajay Spears when I get into his tape as well. So exciting, high upside fantasy football. We say it all the time. I've said on the show now for pretty much 9 years. Is Alvin Kamara the best running back in the NFL? Absolutely not. But he was in a perfect system and he caught a lot of footballs, and that's all we care about here. We don't care about anything but about fantasy football production opportunity. And that's how I kind of grade these players. That's the kind of scale I go from. It's not about what an NFL team wants. I just want what's the highest ceiling for fantasy football points. And Jahmyr Gibbs does offer that.
He sure does.